Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to CAAC 9. We've already made it here to the end of February, and we're at the end of what has been a pretty mild, if somewhat damp around the edges, winter, as long as you're in the Southeast. Spring is right around the corner, and young folks' minds turn to thoughts of, well, Agile, of course. And before we dive into today's agenda, just a little bit of housekeeping for you. This is public service announcement number 1. David Crichton is from IT, and he's here to help. If you run into technical difficulties or any kind of trouble this morning, please chat or email with David, and he'll get it sorted out for you if there is sorting to be done. Now on to the agenda for the morning. Our opening comments, you're stuck with me for about 15 minutes here, and then we'll jump into our first session. Nick Manetti from DWR is going to talk about Scrum there. And then we'll take a 15-minute break. Then Barbara Phillips is going to come on and talk about Scrumban here at VSP. Then we'll do a conference retrospective like we do at the end of all of these conferences, and that'll wrap up the morning. Now to get us going on that end of the conference retrospective, I'm going to turn things over to David. Mr. Crichton.
Good morning, everyone. I am going to share my screen. All right, as Stephen said, I'm David Crichton. I'm a business analyst here at VSP. I'm going to be facilitating the retrospective later, but I wanted to share the board with you so that while we're going through the conference, if you have any thoughts, you can just go to the board, put them down, and they'll be there later. We're using a free tool called Retro. Stephen's gonna put the link in the chat and hopefully pin it at the top, right, Stephen?
I am. I don't have that link, David.
It's in. Okay, hang on. Let me get back to the meeting. I will put it there. And yeah. There we go. Stephen, I don't know if you can pin that to the top or if I can. I'll pin it. See if that works. All right, everybody see the link?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So when you go to that link, you will come upon this screen. You'll have to put your name in there. Can everybody see a login screen? You'll have to check the box to agree to their privacy policy and terms of service, whatever those may be, and then sign in as guest. If you have trouble, hit us up on the chat and we'll work with that. What you should end up on is the board. There's 3 columns. One is keep it up. Those are kudos, whatever you like. You can put it in that column. If you don't like something, put it in the let's not column. If you have an idea for upcoming conferences or things we could tweak, put it in the perhaps we should column. To do this, you click in the blank spot at the top on one of the cards, and I'm going to put something in the love it column. You click up here, type, hit enter, and it shows up. If while you are entering things, you see something that somebody else has typed and it's what you were typing, you can vote by clicking the plus on an existing card, or a minus if you want to take it off of there. You only have 5 votes. So if you find another card you want to vote on, you've already used your 5, you'll have to go back and find what you voted on and take it off of there and put it on the new card. I hope that makes sense. Any questions about that? Very good. If you want to add a comment to a card. So my card was Retro is an easy tool. If you want to add a comment, you can hit the little blue bubble and say, not so easy. And spell it properly. And it should show up there. Oftentimes I find that we have to refresh the screen to see things. So if you've been out of it for a minute or you don't see a change, refresh the screen. My comment is here, and you do have to click on it to see it. It's not going to show up in the bottom of the card. That's pretty much it. Any questions? No? All right.
I'm sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
I just joined, so I missed the beginning of this. So if you've already discussed this, just tell me to stop. But I see where you said this hasn't been screened out by Vita yet. Is this so it hasn't gone through ECOS or any of that because it's probably not worth it, and they're not going to the company to go through ECOS because it's a tool they put out there like all the other tools that eventually we find we can't use. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, this is
Okay.
a free tool on the internet.
Yeah.
On other tools that we found, we got the warning screen from Vita saying, hey, this hasn't been approved. I didn't get this on this one, so we're in good shape so far.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, Stephen, turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, David. On to public service announcement number 2 for the morning. We have a website at vsp.virginia.gov/CAAC. You'll find a quick introduction to the conference, information about the next one coming up, and content from the last 2. So this is where you'll go if you want to see the video that we are recording of this morning's session, as well as links to the presentations as well. There's also a link where you can register for the next conference, which 44 of you found before this morning. And of course, when you registered, you answered a question for us about Agile in your agency. So we're going to look at that in just a second. We also have a new logo. On to the survey results. So as I said, we have 44 responses from 15 different agencies, including a couple that I don't remember seeing before. So for all of you who are new to the conference, welcome aboard. In fact, I'd like to take a quick poll on that. So we're going to start a poll. Everyone, please answer this question for me. Loading polls. How many CAAC conferences have you attended? Got 37 responses so far, 38. I'll give it another 8 seconds and then we'll move on. So of these answers, looks like the 38% of you are brand new to the conference. This is your first one. So welcome. We are delighted that you're here. We have 30% who have been to a few, 18% that might have missed one, been to most of them, and then 15% who've been to all 9. Given the percentages and the number of folks, that may be all the members of the planning team. I don't know. But thanks for that. Now, looking at the pre-registration responses, and that question was, what flavor of Agile do you use in your agency? And 43% of you report using Scrum. 23% say we're not doing Agile at all, and 13% said we're doing something, but you didn't list it. And then Kanban, Scrumban, Safe, and I don't know kind of finish out the chart there. That's an interesting picture. To me, the most interesting number is that second bar from the left, the none choice. And that got me thinking. So I redid the charts to answer the question, what is each agency doing? Rather than what do all the individuals know who took this. And that gives me this picture. So of 15 agencies reporting, 5 of you don't use any Agile methods at all. 4 are using Scrum, 2 using Kanban, 4 using some combination of Agile methodologies. So for all of you who are here from agencies who don't use any Agile methodology at all, I'm really glad to see you. I and the CAAC planning team hope that what you're getting from these conferences helps you to take the first step in Agile development. So welcome aboard. All right, so how do our results line up with the rest of the world? These statistics are from the 16th annual State of Agile report, which is available from, strangely enough, stateofagile.com. And you'll see here that almost 90% of respondents use Scrum, up from only 58% 2 surveys ago. Likewise, Kanban has just exploded from 7% up to 56% in the same time period. And Scrumban has increased from 10 to 27%. So incidentally, this survey was completed by 40,000 respondents from all over the world, about half from North America, 25% from Europe, 11% from Asia, 5% from South America, 3% from Australia, New Zealand, 1% from Africa. Now, I'd like to poll all of you taking these categories. Let us know which flavors of Agile you're using in your agency. You can select as many or as few as the choices as you like. And there's a scroll on the right. So you've got all 9 of those choices available to you. So go ahead and answer that now. Let's give it just another few seconds here. So what we see is pretty much mirroring our pre-conference poll, our survey. Scrum in the lead with 41% of you using Scrum in your agency, 26% with Kanban, 20% using Scrumban, 10% claiming iterative, and then a 1% down there saying, I don't know, or none of the above. So my final poll for the morning, I'm sure you're glad to hear, is, so how's that working out for you? How satisfied are you with the flavor of Agile that you're using in your agency now? We'll give that another 12 seconds. Okay, so a 3.7 satisfaction rating for everybody's Agile choices. Well, I hope that the sessions that we're about to dive into give you a little bit of insight into what some of our other agencies are doing and where you can go for help in increasing that rating if you want to do that. Thanks everybody for participating, and we're going to jump into our first session of the morning. So I'm going to turn this over to Nick Manetti. I'll introduce Nick, actually reintroduce him. Nick's spoken a couple of times way back in CAAC 3 for sure. He's been with the Department of Wildlife Resources since 2002. He graduated from ECPI in 1998, and his current role at DWR is, and I quote, the servant leader, aka the IMS development manager of the IMS development team. That's all development, analysis, testing, and GIS services for DWR with a team of 10. He's a CSM, has been a Scrum practitioner since 2015. When Nick is not coding, performing system analysis, or practicing Agile at work, he's usually working on the house, working on the yard, working out, or working on graphic art projects. So Nick, please take it away.
All right, thank you. Good morning. I'm going to go ahead and get the screen share thing working. And I cleverly disguised my desktop where I'm not started yet. So now I can go ahead and get this rolling. All right, everyone sees the screen that looks a lot like the format of the rules. It should say Scrum from very large, that kind of thing. Everybody sees that?
Yes, sir.
Alrighty. Well, so this is kind of a discussion again about the DWR's journey into Agile Scrum. Your journey may vary. In many regards, we've transformed our agency development framework. In some ways, folks resisted the implementation of the framework. Our IMS teams accepted it, and so we're leading by example. And if folks want to get their stuff done, whether they know it or not, they're doing Agile. Our rule has been to focus on the things we control, accept the things we can't, and work to have the wisdom to know the difference, as all the old saying goes. So this is largely going to be a talk, so please sit back and hear about our flavor of Agile, and we'll compare notes at the end. So you heard that part. When I first started there was Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, and they had just started working a bunch of IT projects. They had like a System 36 thing doing their accounting and some other point of sale things, and we completely revamped that. And in the last 20-something years I've been there, it's just really grown up. We were managing several point of sale systems and educational vendors. We're building stuff internally. We're managing our law enforcement tools. We're managing our biology science tools. There's a ton of stuff we're hitting with that. So I came from the coding and ETL automation, but I love testing and I love system analysis and improvement. And that was I'm right up Scrum's alley on that. I really fell in love with the framework. But we kind of ran into some issues. We're not a huge agency, about 500 people, but we're statewide. So add up all the local municipalities and counties and divide that by 500, and that's how many police officers we have. And then the hierarchy of staff above that to support them in leadership, and then all the biology science, the same thing. So our journey starts with the pain point, like most. Our was a lack of consistency in project quality and success. It seemed like we were having projects, output deliverables, and weren't always the right thing at the right time. So when I proposed to my boss, let's try the Scrum thing, he's like, sure, go ahead. That sounds great. They were supportive, but not really engaged in the details, which is actually a good management thing on that point. But at the same time, they quickly learned that we were having the requirement to still do things like the focus on support of the agency without being able to focus on single projects, even though as a team of 10 we barely were big enough to support one or two teams in the Scrum framework. So who has this problem? Usually teams of 10 or fewer, because that and the subject matter support variance is pretty significant. I mean, we have 30, 40 customers for different applications we're supporting. The team was especially concerned with the changes of implementing the Scrum. So benefits of Scrum, I felt were huge if we could be leveraged effectively, but it's changed, and that's something that has to be managed for folks that aren't necessarily feeling like they're in control, especially when you're giving them the control and now they're going to be accountable to it. So like things like stand up, that was a real struggle at first, but our initial sprint work would constantly stall. We missed deadlines every time an operational issue would come up where we were pulled off because of leadership's lack of support in directly implementing the framework. So we really needed to figure out a way to have a single team efficiently manage multiple backlogs in parallel. How can we be supporting operations and doing development where we're actually adding value and delivering on deadlines? So we kind of struggled with thank you to the user group stuff. Participating, we started our Scrum journey directly, continued along. We struggled, and we were learning and growing, and we really couldn't focus on that single effort. So it seemed like all the distractions would continuously derail our sprints. So thanks to connections we made and conversations I had, I found out that this thing called Nexus was real popular with a company who rhymes with Slapital One. And so they had a huge project they started back in 2018 and went through to about spring of 2019. And they originally were looking like 4 years to do it. But the particular huge retailer that was looking to have a branded card, they're like, no, we're contracted with somebody now. You got to get us through faster than that. And so they leveraged this Nexus thing. So they were Nexus. And I was like, well, it's kind of interesting. Let's see what this is about. So they were able to compress a 4-year project into less than 1 year. And so I found that to be pretty impressive. So for anyone who drove to work on 288, you may know about that project if you ever worked for that company that rhymes with Slapital One. But I looked at it as, wow, that it's hard to argue with the results. And I think I mentioned it later here, but despite their the later issues with that have recently come up at that particular banking company, when they embraced it, they sure benefited from it. So that was kind of inspiring. So looking at Nexus in reverse, or back to us little teams. We don't have 5,000 people working on teams. In particular to the example I mentioned, 5,000 now, because those ungrateful bean counters that canned over 1,000 of the very people who made the next project work are now filtering their way through to new opportunities, I suppose. Anyway, I digress. The Scrum, the question kind of came: is Scrum just for bigger groups where we can have teams that can focus? I know that's a format that DEQ is able to leverage. I had a spy find out about how they've got several teams that manage what I'm talking about now with separate teams. But we're just not that. We're just as an agency, we haven't been able to prioritize growing teams big enough to be able to support that. So does that mean we're just banished to the project piece? Because you look at like a sorry. Does that mean we're banished for a project trash heap and we can't use Scrum or Agile? It's like, maybe not, because what if? So I looked at this Nexus thing and I said, what if we invert the project team membership relationship? It's like framework physics. Does the scale affect the rules? So if you're guessing, that's kind of what my title was about. When they introduced quantum theory, that was the one of the papers. That was from the very large to the very small. So Scrum Harmony is kind of a quantum theory, if you will, and so versus the relativity. So because Nexus means connecting and linking two or more things. So that's the idea. You build a backlog, you manage a backlog from a Nexus team, you engage multiple integrated teams working from a common backlog, and that's the Nexus format. And here's a nice drawing from scrum.org that kind of demonstrates it. You have that common backlog, then the sprint planning breaks those out into the individual teams to see where they can run in parallel, and they work the 3 to 9 teams. They got the integration team managing the integration, and then they have their next sprint reviews, integrated increment, and then they cycle back through. I was like, okay, so what if we had a resource backlog instead of a product backlog? In other words, a resource backlog is the inversion to Harmony. So we have centralized resource backlog, which is a cross product. This backlog is reviewed at like a weekly ops tech meeting, an operational tech meeting, which are sprints that are 1 week long. Each operation task list is prioritized against the active projects. We also review product versus sprint backlogs there. So we're making sure that we keep moving forward and we're not having the stops that we were when we tried to do a single sprint and then operations was interrupting it. So we also consult with stakeholders quarterly to synchronize with our budgeting cycles. So all the resources participate in a common daily scrum. So we do a common daily scrum. So all 10 folks are in that scrum every single day. And we review a top 3. We cover done, doing, and impediments, cover our priorities, and provide feedback to each other. Then our retros for the operational sprints, those weekly sprints, that one's done here, would be where we hit the operation sprints, cover project sprints, and then we eventually have a quarterly meeting that helps kind of shape the team's trajectory to make sure that things aren't getting mixed up with priority and everyone's kind of keeping up with it, keeping up with their end of what their role is. And so the inversion to Harmony is that you would have a centralized backlog cross product. So all the product backlogs from each individual sprints go into a capacity plan. Then we have the team capacity where each of those members are working on their role in multiple sprints. And the idea is that there has to be that centralized backlog, that cross product. The backlog is reviewed at weekly ops tech meetings so that we're making sure that stuff happening here is being accounted for stuff happening in this sprint and this sprint. And we're making sure we're not overtaxing the team members, and we're making sure we're keeping up with the velocity. So, and because these team members are participating in the creation of these product backlogs and the sprint plans. And so there's a feedback loop there. We also review product versus sprint backlogs. Further, we consult with the stakeholders quarterly. Sorry, I got that same piece there. So the retros for each of those elements for the the operations are the same retrospective with when they complete weekly, and then the sprints themselves are all synchronized to last 2 to 4 weeks. And so we pick and choose the projects based on that cycle so that they're all in the same cycle. So when we finish one, we decide amongst ourselves what are going to be the next increments of whichever projects are going to be in, and that depends on what operations things we might have. And so the sorry, I just my clock went to sleep. Make sure I'm staying on time. All right, so that's the biggest piece of what we're trying to emphasize as well, is that we're not leaving the sprints to, once we start them up, and the fact that we're team members are members of multiple sprints and the operational support, we're not losing the priorities that we're setting as we go week to week. It means a few more meetings, because this is another layer of meetings to do these operational sprints, but they're sprints, so they're it's part of what we need to do, is the collaboration and keeping with the ceremonies that they go into. So we look at this and we kind of think to ourselves, okay, so the idea of modifying the framework is kind of counterintuitive. Why change it if it isn't broken? And why make it more complex if it increases demands on the team? Isn't that kind of the backwards of what we're trying to do with Agile and especially Scrum? So at its core, the harmony concept is a bolt on to Scrum. It's just it's still empirical. Transparency, inspection, and adaptation are still all there. It's simply the idea of building a backlog with parallelism instead of serialization. So instead of saying we're going to build the sprint, we're going to build the sprint, we're going to build the sprint, and we work on the first sprint and work that plan and adjust as necessary, we're saying we're doing that, but we're going to do that for multiple deliverables per cycle and take into consideration the things that were normally just derailing us in our process. So we're scaling Scrum to share the resources when the sprint delivery can't engage all the team resources, because that's another piece we're running into. Folks weren't always, if you're a GIS developer, then if you don't have a GIS project that the whole rest of the team is working on, what do? Just sit around and wait. So we were matching up sprints that way too, to make sure that all the resources were as engaged as the work cycles would allow. So all the players are still in place, but and it is truly more demanding to do this. But I think, that's kind of par for the course for the smaller teams. You have to be a full stack developer. You have to know all the little bits and pieces of how things run. You can't specialize and I'm just a developer and somebody else does testing. And that's kind of a core to what what Scrum is too. So, we build the backlog with the serialization. We manage the backlog with other Scrums so that the feature elements. And when you look at it, is it really different to just say that a completely deliverable feature for a product has to be completed on just that product for a cycle, when the idea is you might have 2 or more features in a Scrum for a single product anyway? So we're kind of thinking it's, for what we needed to do, this adaptation really worked well, and we could adjust our velocity, scale, and scope. I mean, we just recently had in what was it, September, October, Sec 501 changed out section I, AI. It's the password complexity. Some of you folks might have been working on projects that had to accommodate that. So when that project came out back in April and they were talking about it, we started making plans for it to be deliverable by October. That derailed a whole bunch of projects we were working, because all those applications that had to be touched to increase complexity for some of this and change out the cycles for renewing passwords. That was all resources that we had to put towards solving that instead of solving this other stuff. So this worked out perfect for that. We just, parked all those other ones, picked these up, got back to them. And as soon as those password elements were implemented, we picked right back up where we left off. And that was that scale and scope that we really can control. The advantage is the breadth of support we can offer, and it's much greater flexibility, but it is at a cost of velocity. We can't do as much as we could if we could focus on one thing. But at the same time, the agency can get away with a staff of 10, and our net effect is being able to support a spectrum of services that we couldn't. So harmony in this context means agreement, and we're agreeing what projects we're working and how. Another little time check. We're doing good. So the quantum theory for Scrum for us has been, we have the 3 issues that I define here, kind of breaking it down. The idea of teams is dynamic. For a few weeks, someone might work on a sprint for project A, B, and C, and as we approach the increment completion, the team member looks into those backlogs and gets or gives the discipline team meeting. That's the operations meetings, and plans what the next sprints they should participate should be. And then emphasis on the artifacts being transferable is key. One person might define a work item in one sprint for project A, and then hand that off to somebody else because they're not going to be in the next sprint on sprint B, because they're going to be taken off to do something else. So the better the artifacts, the cleaner the transfer. The events are easily recognizable, but the content requires a bit more engagement, because we really do have to focus on once a week kind of checking where we're at. And so everyone has to pay attention to that priority element that we factor in, because each participant may cover any one of the three priorities or all three in a single day cycle. And our operation meetings weekly help perform that role of running a refinement on all active priority work items, so that if project A has changed something that prioritizes it over B, where it used to be B was over A, then we know that switch, and then we can help communicate that. And so that's a big piece of what we do. So, how can you be on more than one team? How does teams are supposed to cross-functional, so team managers get a chance to manage their work. If team norms are set to accomplish matching sprints, why can't a team member be part of multiple sprints? If it's built into the team norm that that's one of the elements that we have to accommodate, then we accommodate it. And we define and match increments coordinated by the team members. Because if a person is in project A and doing a big ops support, they need to make sure that whatever they do when they're scoping and scaling their work items, that they manage it to let folks understand. It's like, I got 40 hours of support for this app, but I have 40 hours available, but it's at least 30 of it's going to be this ops thing I got to work on. So let's just factor on me on being 10. If I can pick something else up, let's put it to the side, but don't anybody, assign me that one for 10 hours, but don't let anybody else to be dependent on me finishing the other one to complete their part of the sprint. And so that's the kind of conversation we would have. And then the events, the daily stand up is per the whole Scrum team. So that's a really difficult thing to manage, to get 10 separate people all to come together at the same time of the same day every day. I think I hear somebody. If you're talking, you might want to mute. I can hear someone talking in the background there a little bit. So in small teams, the Harmony team is set up the same team, so we all use that same stand up. And I think, like some folks, like the GIS team members are like, hey, look, some of this development stuff really doesn't pertain to us. And it's like, but if things come up and they do, it's better to just be part of that process. It's 15 minutes a day. You can let everybody know what you're working on. They can let you know what they're working on. And if you need anybody for help, you've got that straight. So yeah, the cross-functional focus team event is really the other piece we're hitting. And that's that operations team. That's a weekly sprint. We literally, one team will start on a Tuesday and then plan everything up to the next Monday. And then they start on Tuesday again and recycle back again, and just manage reviewing their sprints that they're parts of, and reviewing if any operations or other considerations popped up. So the teams in Harmony, we have to really emphasize those 3 Scrum values. I found this to be really interesting. If we don't balance these 3 items, you kind of look at where, if you're having any of these issues, take a look at a chart like this. This is, I think, very valuable, and it helped us a lot. If we're not being transparent in our weekly meetings and our project meetings, sprints, the planning meetings and the reviews, we're looking at the opportunities of losing out, stagnating, where we would run into. If we're not doing fixing the right thing, if we're on wild goose chases, if you're seeing stagnation, those are it's usually an issue of not engaging all 3 of those factors at the same time. So our team norms are built around making sure we help maintain this, in addition to the psychological safety factor, which is a whole nother thing. But the team members use the rule 3 items per day, 3 projects max in a week. So that means they can, if they're comfortable, simply say, I got a week to do something. It's 8 hours, so I will wait to a single day and just do it there. I can split my stuff up and go 2.5 hours a day and hit 3 things in one day. Whatever their work pattern is, it's up to them. So by default, they're almost certainly members of 2 teams, and likely part of maybe one more. So the team members are accountable to each other and their plan as much as they are to communicate the deviations from the plan. It is critical that if something comes up, they make sure everybody knows at least at the daily sprint, if not sooner. What we learned is most folks get derailed by distractions outside of the Scrum universe. The bright, shiny objects are so tempting. Someone walks up and says, hey, what about this? Or you start digging into something deeper than you have to for the results we're looking for in the sprint. So we try to minimize that, because That was really where I think we saw the most in our retrospectives when we started addressing it. That was where we were hitting. So and so said they were going to have this thing done on day 3. Then I waited 4 extra days, and then I was crushed in the last 2 days of the sprint trying to finish everything because I didn't get it in time. And then, well, I was this production thing came up, and it's like, okay, so you brought that to our attention. I remember hearing about that, and then we started analyzing that element. It's like, okay, so if something comes up, if you don't complete tasks as you planned, the red flag is let's address it. I mean, stuff comes up, and sometimes it's just us. Man, I meant to do this, but I couldn't focus on it, and I couldn't get to it. It's sometimes it's just that much. Your best that day might not be your best all time. And that's just life. But the idea is, if it's derailing somebody else, you owe it to them to let them understand. It's like, yeah, I kind of dropped the ball, but it doesn't matter why it happened. But I'm not ready yet. So let's factor that in and figure out what we can do. But 3 seemed to be like a magic number. If it was less than 3, it was easy to get. Well, both of my stuff aren't working. If it's more than 3, it's too many balls in the air. So it's too much to juggle. So 3 was like nice. If you could usually find one of your 3 priorities to work on every single day. Oh, I got an email out to somebody asking to take a look at this. I'm waiting for testing to take a look at this, and I think I'm ready, and I'm trying to schedule a demo. But I got this thing over here I can work on. And so it actually helps, probably, even though it reduces probably our overall velocity, the way we have to communicate with these meeting elements, it does have a benefit of we are much more likely to do the right things right. And that can be, I think that's Scrum's biggest promise. Our artifact elements, our framework model.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Apologies. This is Barbara Phillips. I did put my hand up. So back on the previous slide, if it was okay, you touched on something which I thought was very interesting, and it's Barbara Phillips with VSP, and I'm a Scrumban Scrum Master. It sounded like if people are working on different teams, did I hear that correctly? They might be on several projects, right, within different teams.
Team subsets, yes.
Yeah. How, if everyone's how do you work out prioritizations across those teams as far as their work? If a product owner is expecting that if you're on a certain team that the stories that they've prioritized are going to get done while they're on that same resource is also have a product owner on another team that's also asking for the same. So how is that prioritization done across when you're working across teams and I'm assuming with several product owners?
Yes. So like I said, we have 40 product owners, and we have the 7 divisions all represented in what we call our steering committee. And so every 90 days we meet as a steering committee and prioritize the projects. So if the product A here is the priority over product B, and product A stagnates for whatever reason, then product B can can be bumped up, because if the subject matter expert or product owner isn't available to do whatever they need to do, well, we're not going to stop. We'll pick up the next product. We've got a priority list that's 3 years long, so we can always find more work to do and fill any gaps. But the idea is, they know we're always going to work to the priority list, and that priority list is open source. Anyone on the steering committee can go to that list, and if someone says my product is, they keep delaying my product, my project, what's going on, then they can go back to that list and say, well, we prioritize this one over your project, and then they can fight that out amongst themselves. But the idea is, what we are basing that on, we hit that out. Now, of course, in these product backlog sprint plans, the product owner is also notified. If that team member this team member is had this part of the role here and has this part of the role in the backlog here, they say, well, this one isn't the higher priority, so I'll make sure to get this done first, and then I'll work on this. And then he's in the other team telling that team that same thing in this sprint planning. Hey, I've got to work on this thing before I work on this. So my time is, I can only give you 10 hours out of my 40 potential in the sprint. I can only vouch up for so that is a communicated element. So we actually communicate that in the sprint planning, and as things come up, I would take on that as the CSM. I would take that on to the product owner and say, hey, we were thinking this was going to happen. Something came up, and that's, so this is how we're adjusting what we're delivering, and that's, that's how we manage that. So the team is purposely pulling back velocity on one project at the expense of the other, as they are that resource. But at the same time, that's appropriate based on the prioritization of what we accomplished when we had our last steering committee meeting to say project A is more important than project B in the big scheme of things. So if something A needs, it will be prioritized. If something comes up, B or C are the ones that are going to take the biggest hit on resource depletion, not A, because A is our top priority, and we'll do everything we can to keep it going. B and C will do what we can. But the idea is whenever those things pop up, then that's it. And then in a retrospective, those kinds of we try to document what those issues are. So when we go back to the steering committees on the quarterly basis, we get that feedback from those from the retrospects to say, we can't get C projects going because they're constantly being derailed by operations. And then, so when you guys want higher velocity, we have to increase the resources. Otherwise, you're happy with what we gave you because you budgeted to have this level of resource availability. And so far, it's working really well. It's really hard for them. It's like, if law says, hey, we want to have a much more, we need this water marker application for, but we need it in the next 6 months. And then we look at it and say, no, there's, how do we, we looked at the priority. These other things are Fed mandates, and these are, VETA considerations. You can't override those. And so go back to your budget, figure out how to get the resources as a contractor, or find us new people, and we'll take that task on. Until then, you don't really think you're not putting your money where your mouth is. So, what we have is what you got. I think that really is the most effective way. Like I said, whether they know they're doing Scrum or not, that element is of saying, it's like you're the ones on the leadership that are saying this is the resources we're applying to the agency's capacity for IMS projects. If you want more capacity, give us more people. If you look at our state agency, we are, as a percentage, probably in the lower 80 percentile of total IT resources for staffing. And so our capacity is potentially lower, even though we're able to provide a much more diverse set of resource projects. We're still fairly low. So they're getting a bargain for what they're doing, but the cost of the bargain is capacity, that trajectory, the capacity, and the and our ability to sustain higher velocities. It's what they're paying for, so it must be what they want. And that's our team norm. Number one is we are budgeted appropriately. That's our number one team norm. We as a IMS development team, we are budgeted exactly the way that leadership wants us to be. So if somebody comes along and provides new information, we provide that to the leadership. And until then, we're working with what they gave us and doing our best to support them. But at the same time, that's what it is. So if they want to take law officers off the street and turn them into developers so they can get a project done, then they must really want that project. And if they're not willing to do that, then they are comfortable working with what we got. Or they can go back and reprioritize, work with the agency's leadership to reprioritize us, and we'll do whatever they say. So it's good boundary maintenance that way. They can't just come in and say, "Hey, look, we didn't make any plans. We didn't anticipate. We could have anticipated this, but we're not going to do anything about it. So go ahead and have at it." We can provide them the opportunity to see that they, if they want the freedom to have projects, they have to have the responsibility to providing us with the resources to make those happen. And things are tight. They're tight everywhere. So sometimes we just have to recognize that sometimes we have to prioritize one thing over another. So that, Barbara, does that help? Is that, you see where I'm going with that?
Yes. So yes, we do a similar thing, but not, and yeah, it just brings me back to the old demand capacity days, regardless, if you get everybody to play nice in the sandbox, and as you said, if you really want it, show us the money.
Yeah, I mean,
so it's easy enough. It's like you have the power. But until then, we come to this agreement. It sounds like, right? And you guys you approach it a little bit differently, but the end result's the same. And thank you for talking about that, because you've already given a lot of content. That's great segue for the second presentation. So,
right.
Thank you.
All right. So we left off on artifacts, and so same thing here. I think that this framework modification has one really big vulnerability. It's technical debt. I think most agree technical debt pulls out productivity almost as much as it hampers velocity. So if we're not doing the right things right, then we have to stop doing what we were planning to do next to fix what we should have already had right the first time. So that is kind of one of those elements of what this process really helps us do. We're making sure that we're doing what they need, and it really helps with the minimally viable product concept. We're emphasizing managing the operations as a motivating factor. Nobody wants to be pulled back in a project already completed because your part had some problem that you got to go back and fix. So, who wants to be pulled off the new stuff only to refactor old stuff? So the idea of having two separate teams where I just took part of my development staff and part of the part of development staff, you guys, you're ordained to be the developers of new stuff, and you folks over here, you're stuck with maintaining everything else. Well, they're all having fun and making new stuff and creating technical debt that you get to handle. So the idea is to make sure our effort is to focus on great user stories broken down into well-defined work items, self-documented by their own test plans, with well-coordinated diagrams that shorthand all the test-driven development code linked to the work items. That whole circle. And the idea there is, I can't tell you the number of times when we first started going into Scrum, where we were taking those retrospectives and just saying, did anybody look at this code before it went to production? Did anybody demo this to the end user so they knew how to use it? And the answer was coming back no. And I've been there. It's kind of easy just to go, okay, the release is complete. I'm done. Bye. I'm going to go do something else now. And then like, wait. I literally had a program, an accounting program I built that for DCs back when cars was still in vogue. And there was a field in it that the person who was using it never knew was supposed to be filled by something. And man, that particular field was a particular code that let the DOA folks know where the money was going for some other stuff that some system downstream, and they'd constantly call the end user using the app I built and saying, "Oh, you didn't put the code in. What's the code? It's this," and then they'd add it. "Oh, what's the code?" And one day I was in the office troubleshooting something else that she was having. I was just building a new tool and adding some features, and she gets the call. And she said, that's here's the code. It was like a 5-digit code. And I was like, I can't remember what it was because we lost all that when we went to the new Cardinal. And so I was like, why didn't you just put it in the field? And she said, what field? She'd been using the system for 4 years, not knowing that the code they were asking for now fit right there on a field that she never knew was what it was for, because she didn't recognize the label. I used the DOA abbreviation, and she called it something else on the little form that used to print out when they were handwriting the things. So it's like, oh, well, that sucks. I guess I should have demoed better. So I did it too. But in our future efforts, we didn't have that happen. We were much more in the position to hit that stuff up. So not having to go back and deal with technical debt is what is ultimately the biggest outlier for hitting up velocity. So if you're doing a poor job, but you're doing a lot of work, it can seem like there's a lot of churn, so it looks like you're busy. But if you're doing the right thing right the first time and getting it into production the way they wanted it, and you're able to work on the next stuff, then you're improving. Plus, by better artifact creation, you're coordinating. All that coordinating helps minimize the tightly coupling. Coordinating all that minimizes tightly coupling the coder or the tester, the SME, means we have much better resource interchangeability. I write a good user story and turn it into a good list of work items on a Kanban. Anybody can come and pick that up, and I can say Kanban any way I want. And so somebody else can come on and go, oh, okay, I see what they're trying to do. Okay, I'll figure that out. It might not be the exact same code that the other person would do, but if it satisfies the need, who cares? Minimally viable product is our goal, and to get something into the user's hands as fast as possible for them to be able to start taking a look. So I wanted to wrap up about 10, so I got just a few more of these slides to run through here. So again, events are all the same. They just overlap on the operations and product a little bit, and that's what we were just talking about. The idea is we want to provide the structure to review the product backlogs in a resource-centric light. So when we're in the operations meeting, we're reviewing based on that person's resource allocation. How much can that team member support in the projects that we have prioritized? And then also, does everybody have a role in the next set of sprints? And then, if the developer is going to be on vacation for a week, does that alter the team composition? Do we plan around that availability? And the answer is sure. Whatever the team norm and the team comes up with to satisfy the increment, moving the football down the field, if you will, or delivering a value, providing that minimally viable product, those elements. The events are derived to assist us in seeing that stuff coming, those kinds of events coming, so we can plan for the contingencies. Oh, so-and-so's going to be out for a week. Let's just skip this project. They're the centerpiece of this thing. We'll pick up something else for that 2 weeks. When they come back, we'll regroup with them on the next set of sprints, and we'll pull that project back in. So we'll just de-emphasize whatever their elements were and emphasize what resources will be available. Like we normally would in any sprint. So this is our solution evolved. We built those team norms to emphasize an ability to perform serial multitasking. I'm sorry, that should be a parallel. I forgot to edit it from the other piece. Sorry, but that should be parallel. Parallel multitasking. Each member is responsible for the organization of their tasks. That's who implements. And why not hold out for single project Scrum? Well, team members add value every day in this framework instead of ever being idle. It seemed like we were running a bit idle because we didn't always have operational elements, and we didn't always have projects that included everyone's skill sets. So it was much more efficient, and we filled a lot more gaps and closed down a lot of those air bubbles in our velocity by letting folks do that. And how do we measure it? Task velocity for ops and project delivery are a metric. But those quarterly retros, the end users, are they happy with the results they're getting? And when we do our quarterly retro as a team, we come together as a team every 90 days and do the lists when we first started, before we're kind of hitting this harmony, we had the bits and pieces, but a lot of op stuff and interruptions and a lot of dead space whereas now, I mean, we literally will do those big blotter paper things, and we're writing 2 or 3 of those for all the cool things we did in that sprint, and that's from all the sprints in that quarter. And that was the cool part, because the biggest issue in the process is how well does your solution work? How does it compare to the rest? Our point is more about doing the best we can under our circumstances, and I think that's kind of what we're aiming for. I'm confident that if we provide solutions tightly coupled to agency goals, and we honestly evaluate that delivery, we're doing the best we can. Like we said, they gave us what we got, and we're prioritizing that as best we can and delivering on it as fast as we can. We evaluate ourselves every day, once a week, sustainably too. That's the other point. But we evaluate ourselves every day, once a week, every plan review retro, and the biggest one, our quarterly. We come together and write up all the work done, and then we have, as a group, we don't single each other out for their contributions, but focus on what collectively we can celebrate and what we can improve. The individual efforts are one-on-one, so we can make sure we can focus on that grace and truth paired with that validation. Everyone's trying his hardest, and sometimes things distract us, so we understand that. We had folks who just wouldn't thrive in other environments, and we worked to help them find other places, maybe a better fit in other groups, other agencies. So we've had that. Some people just rejected this to the point where like, I'm not doing this. It's like, well, let's find you something else then, because we're doing this. and the rest of the team is thriving. So let's find you a better, maybe some people just they didn't like the full stack and the self-organizing elements that they had to do. And so we found other places to work, and they went on their thing. Every time we followed the discipline and stayed agile and objective, this process was effective and delivered value every time. Every time we sat there, we almost wanted to change our retro. It was like, how did we fall off the plan? As in, how do we not follow the discipline? And every time we find that that's it. And it's not that this is magic. It's simply, it's the emphasis. If we're all paying attention and got our eye on the same ball, and we're all tracking to the same trajectory at a sustainable velocity, we're successful. And that's what I think was killing us, is that we were almost cutting our own throats to, get this process to move forward, or to resist it at first. And then once we started accepting it, it's like, man, look, an example of a success. We followed the plan. An example where we had some improvement issues. We didn't follow the plan. What didn't we do? And so we've been, the framework itself, the Scrum is what works so well for us there. I'm got to be getting pretty close. Yep. All right. So just real quick, tools we use at DWR to make it all work. We're big in MS Teams. That's our big collaboration tool. All operation teams and all projects get two channels, team channel and the project channel. So there's one that we have exclusively to us, so we can be frank and honest about what we're doing. And then the one we share with the subject matter experts and the product owners, so they can see what's going on with their projects. Current copies of team norms, project artifacts, all the meetings and useful parts we can think of are all stashed there. So we all have that, and everyone can go open source, see those at any point. Roadmaps for features, everything, all that stuff there. Azure DevOps is their go-to for source control. TFS, as its former name, they call it Azure DevOps now. That's our requirements repository, our source control. It's eventually going to, we're working to, it's where our test plans are. We also have a requirement references in there. We're still working on pipeline development, so start doing the actual DevOps releases, but we definitely tie our request management directly to change sets there, so that we can do our code coverage and we can do our test mapping. Visual Studio is our biggest tool for supporting the tools. Even if it's office automation, GIS items, we still utilize Visual Studio for managing the actual deliverables, the files, the references to things, the step-by-steps that we have. We tightly couple our tests to requirements to a point where a full test plan is actually a draft that we present as an application manual. It is so integrated into the feature functionality of our applications that our test plan is actually what we put into Word and give them as an application manual. Now, our documentation, we also try to keep in as MDs. If you're not aware, that's Markdown. It's really cool. It's a text, it's like saving a text pad file, but it has markups or markdowns in it that allow it to do formatting like headers, and it converts in Visual Studio and some other tools into a HTML. And then so I can literally take a 37-page procedures manual, update something on page 18, check it in, say, hey, everybody, go, I made a change, go take a look. That's all I got to tell them, because they can use compare in Studio to say, oh, okay, page 18, this is these two lines were this, and now he changed it to this, or he corrected spelling on page 72, or what, whatever it came out to. It's a very quick way to get them to hit it up instead of having to read through the whole thing and guess. Plus, then they can go into Teams, and then they got to say, yeah, I read it. So I can help track them that way too. Azure DevOps, So we kind of use this evil empire thing with Microsoft. So I took on the persona of Darth Vader, and so for those not familiar, Azure DevOps comes in hosted and cloud. We're using the hosted variety, and it integrates into the AD for the users, so it's really kind of cool that way too. And then we all have full access to it, but even team members can have what they refer to as there's a level of free access that so people can see the plans without actually being able to mess with them. They can't edit them, so that works with us. And so we do a lot of our planning meetings, and a lot of our reviews are just going down the work items and making say, this is what we said we were going to do. Here's our roadmap. This is what we said we're going to do. Here's what we actually did. Here's the change sets. We're ready for development. You guys already had a demo. You took a look at it. You loved it. We're going to release, sign here. And that's a lot of what we are able to do with that tool for how we integrate our deployments. We have a bunch of other tools too. ArcGIS is a big part of some of the tools we hit, so that's got a place. We use Redgate. That's a bunch of tools to automate SQL Server stuff. We use the SQL Server tools, the SMS, SSIS, SSAS, the SQL Server management, integration, and analysis tools. DevExpress for our user interface stuff. Bunch of monitoring tools we're playing around with. MS Office as well. These three that I mentioned are main ones for our Scrum framework, so that's why I kind of pointed them out. But tools come and go, and it's the framework that matters. It's no one tool can do it all, so it's whatever you've got available. You might find it works out pretty well. So now, real quick, this is kind of like this is the day in the life of a developer at DWR. So they show up 8 o'clock, they check their email, review their Azure DevOps stuff, they go into MS Teams, and they prep for stand-up. They actually post in a particular stand-up channel what they did, what they're doing, and their impediments. So they're all set with that. Some folks do it before they leave the night before. Some folks do it the morning of. Some do it 5 minutes before the meeting starts. It's up to them. They just have to do it before the meeting. 9 o'clock, we have a stand-up. Everybody is at the stand-up. If you're working from home, you're on camera. If you're in person, you're in person. If you're in the office, you're in person. So we just stand up the whole team. It's a minute each. We hit that almost every day. Well, we do hit it every day. Sometimes we have a little talk after, but we're done signing off from the stand-up at 9:15. So at 9:15, anything we tabled, they might have a quick talk. So this person had to have a quick talk before getting back to work on tasks. They started working on something from stand-up someone was waiting on. The person forgot that somebody asked them to do something, or it was not quite clear that they were actually waiting on them. So that came up in the stand-up. So they adjusted the priorities and made that work. So this day happened to be a Tuesday. UXIS is our user experience information system team. So that's our developers, the people in charge of interface development and systems, the front. So it's Tuesday, so they get to meet. So that afternoon, and that's that operations meeting. So this is where we're going to have that resource-centric review of tasks, of work items. So they need to review and update their top 3 before the meeting starts. They at the meeting, they go over it and see if everyone agrees. They clean up their backlog for 2 of the projects in the meeting. They just found out they needed a new network diagram for the new project, and they added that work item to the project sprint because they didn't know that no one noticed it until that meeting. Hey, where's the network diagram? And then they came up with they got to do that. So they finished out the day. They got the 2 tasks done. Had a quick conversation with testing because the project design changed because we tightly couple development and testing. The same time our developers are developing to the plan, the testers are building tests based on the description, the wireframes, the workflow diagrams, the object class map. We're actually building out what the test will look like. So as soon as the project is done, if it's designed the way they said they were going to design it, the test just has to have a couple of tweaks maybe, and this is one of those tweaks. And it wants to and they note that they're going to mention it in stand-up tomorrow, so that when they do this prep stand-up thing. They make sure that I talked to testing. I thought I was going to make this 1 page. It's going to be 2 pages. I talked to the owner and they like that better. So I let testing know, and they're going to adjust their thing. And then they'd mention it in their testing, their stand-up as well. Then 4 p.m. they're done for the day. And that's an important point. I'm not looking for heroes. This team is not built of heroes. It's built of hardworking people who efficiently use an 8-hour day. I'm not looking for 12-hour days. If we have to do that, then I failed. I did something wrong. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to if they're hitting that, or they're not doing what they're supposed to, and I called them on it. But either way, it should be an 8-hour day. We should be sustainable velocity.
Hey, Nick, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
You have 5 minutes.
I am. Here's the good timing here. So we've adapted Scrum to work with this flavor. Small teams with ops support struggle. So this is how we came up with it. I'm sure it doesn't solve all the issues small teams have, but it does allow for us. Be bold, try something until it works, and then question it every time if it could be better. Empiricism is the foundation of the framework, and it's how we apply it. Everything we apply with Scrum is rooted in that idea. What's the other thing? Work to validate each other's celebrations, concerns, and promote the kind of psychological safety needed to have a great place to work together. Because ultimately, we want to be able to celebrate a job well done and allow folks to feel frustration and failure and encourage boldness in everything we try, successful or not. So, with the last 5 minutes or whatever we've got, we're 10:09. Good. Yeah. So we got a little 5-minute piece here. If you want to, something specific to this, now we're going to have the chat, we're going to have the overall retro at the end. So if it's something with the format, feel free to do that there. But if there's any feedback you'd like to provide to me, or you have any questions right now, we grabbed one from Barbara. If anybody else has got anything, we could just use the last 5 minutes or so to discuss.
So is that for me, Nick?
Or anybody in general?
I do have a question. I had my hand up. So if you would go back to the previous slide, I don't know if bullet point 2 caught anybody else's attention, and I'd love to get some information on that. So actually, as part of your team, I'm assuming team norms, next one up, sorry, previous slide to that, that you actually every day into an application, you use MS Teams, the team puts in, captures what they did doing an impediment. How was that? How did you get buy-in from the team for that? It's not standard, right? Usually we just stand up and speak through what we approach more of a plan, but within the plan, you capture what you did doing in an impediment. How'd you get the team to actually capture that in an application?
Well, we had at one of the quarterly meetings in our retro, I was saying, look, we need to find a way that if somebody's not here, they can still benefit from the stand-up. How can we're making the effort to do that? If somebody happened to be in late for a doctor's appointment or something like that, I don't want that to be the reason why they get themselves in a situation where they have some trouble. So what do we come up with? And so when we were doing the work from home during the COVID stuff, we were using something we weren't supposed to, we found out later, but something called Range. And Range had a check-in a tool, and everyone was just writing a check-in. So instead of us all trying to coordinate, we would just write in a check-in. But when that went away, we had to find a way to still manage that. So what we actually do is right here in Teams, we have a stand-up. And so this is the one from today. I haven't even seen this before. So everyone talked about what they did, and that's kind of what they're talking through. And then generally, if I'm at the meeting, like I was off Thursday and Wednesday, we actually take a picture of our board. And so everyone's name, here's their doing, to do, and the impediments. So this is everyone's, when they're how late are they working that day, and what they do yesterday, and what they're going to do next. And then here's our 2 open positions.
Okay, great. But that actually align. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
It does align to what we do, but we use, sorry, and I thought MS Teams, I was thinking there was actually a space in there that was just more formalized. So we use chat, which we're on Google right now. we do the same thing, but we do it as an exception. So the expectation is that you'll be at stand up. If you're not able to make it for whatever reason, please put in chat what your plan is for the day. So we only do it if you can't make stand up, but that helps me a lot to understand. Thank you.
Like for me, I was out when I'm out today, and I was out yesterday from quote unquote work. Here I am anyway. But the idea was, because of that, I didn't see anything when I come back Monday, or even right now, I'm looking at it. Here it is. Here's what So here's what they did. Talked about. There was Tuesday. There's Wednesday, and then so here we are in the So they had their whole thing here, and everyone replied. Looks like they had some. We had fun with connecting one day, so we had that. So it tracks what's going on. Anybody can come back and take a look. And I really think that's a very powerful way to collaborate. I think we really get a lot of value out of that. So, anything else, folks? Let me double check the. Oh, I forget when I'm in that. I have to.
Yeah, we are now right at the time limit, Nick.
Yes.
So listen, thank you very much for that insight into the goings on at DWR and a day in the life on your team. Thanks very much for providing that. We are now at the point where we're going to take a quick break. And we're going to take 15 minutes. So everybody take a quick break, and we will see you at 10:30. Okay, good morning again, everyone, and welcome back. We are at 10:30, and a couple of quick announcements here in the middle of the conference. The first, a reminder that our retrospective board is available to you throughout the morning. Here, some folks have been making comments over the last session, so please take advantage of that as you think of ideas for things that we should keep doing or things that we ought to maybe shift around and change a little bit for the next time. Links to the board are in the chat at a couple of different times, so you ought to be able to find that. So please take care of that. And we also got a couple of announcements, so another public service announcement in the chat about two other area Agile activities that are coming up. Scrum RVA has an in-person meetup next Wednesday, March the 1st. You can find information about that online, or as Michael has suggested, sending him an email. He'll be glad to talk to you about it. Also, Agile Richmond is going back to in-person for this year's Innovate VA. So that's coming up at the end of March, and also a great area resource for learning more about doing Agile, being Agile. So please take advantage of those things as you're able. All right, now we're going to move ahead with our conference this morning with Barbara Phillips, who's going to talk about VSP's journey into Scrumban. Barbara's been around the CAAC since the very beginning. She's led sessions in both CAAC 1 and CAAC 4. Her exposure to Agile started back in 2015, where she's practicing both Scrum and Kanban methodologies. Today, she's a Scrum Master at the VSP. In April 22, she led the agency's first team to convert from Scrum to Scrumban. And since then, she's also become Scrum Master for a second team, which is also converted from Scrum to Scrumban. That may teach me something about assigning her to new teams. I don't know. Barbara's a certified VSP Agilist, a professional Scrum Master, and a product owner. She's working on completing her Professional Scrum Master 2 certification. So Barbara, take it away.
All right, thank you, Stephen. So let me see if I can successfully share my screen. Okay. Great. Okay, can I just confirm you all can see my screen and hear me?
Yep, sure can.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. Hey, good late morning. I get to have the fun time of talking to you guys for just about an hour about our journey here at the VSP from going from Scrum to Scrumban. Let me just switch my camera over to here. Go. All right. So as Stephen talked about, we started Scrumban here in April of 2022. So we're going to talk about why did we decide to go Scrumban. I thank you, Nick, for a lot of your slides. I thought that would be a good idea if we leverage some of it, because it was the same basis for a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. So stealing your slide on what was the problem. So our problem is we have one team. It was tasked with multiple applications to support, multiple POs, in addition to production support, and we were all on one team. So who has the problems? Well, any teams that have multiple applications, right? Why should we solve it? So that we can deliver value every day without a lot of complexity, that we can have throughput, that we can satisfy our customers and stakeholders. And how will we know the problem's been solved? Well, I would think initially feedback from our product owners, which they're getting from their customers, from the team itself, and from our stakeholders. Did I just go off? No. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep, sure can.
Okay, thank you. All right. So when I became Scrum Master of this team, they had been doing sprint Scrum, and we did a sprint 0 session. And one of the things we just talked about was what's not going well. And they were like, well, this Scrum thing that we're doing, we're keen on Agile. We get the Agile. We a lot of the we like the values. But what we're having a problem with is the following. We're not like what you read about. You have a single product owner. It feeds into a single team. You're working on one application. So we have multiple product owners, which give us multiple applications, right? We have this one long-term project, and the stories that are written for that are in their smallest, but the smallest happens to be 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And right now they were working in 3-week sprints. So they were continuously having stories by design that were to the next sprint. And optically, it was looking as if they were not doing their job, even though it was, like I said, by design. So that was it. It's like, hey, we have some applications that are in operation and maintenance. Some applications are building new features. And then we have a project stuck in there, which is a migration project. And that by design has these testing. We're doing all this testing, and the testing just takes days. And then in addition to that, the team was also doing production support. So we weren't, we were focusing on stories, but if a production support issue came in that needed to be attended to immediately, that got prioritization. So we kind of felt like this round hole of Scrum, that we were the square peg, or vice versa. It just wasn't fitting. And multiple applications started there. So just to take a look at, so what do we do? So we take a look at Scrum, and so in Scrum, they were all on board with sprint planning. They get it, or I'm just going to start calling it planning. The team understood there was a need to have some semblance of knowing what was coming up. They were all on board on the roles within Scrum, definitely in the daily stand-up, the review, and the retrospective. But what was having a problem, as I bring down here, was that it was feeding into the sprint backlog, and just the nature of the time bound. And that was the main thing. Sprint planning was fine, but the sprint, which is up here at the top of the 5 events in Scrum, was the one that was causing them the most angst. And again, it was an optic. It was being very well managed by the Scrum Master at the time during the sprint reviews. They were using imperialism and transparency to make that known, but there was still just this feeling that the team just thought, at the end of every sprint, we're carrying over these stories. They also felt that they were they appreciated, again, sprints. There was, I don't want to say there was pressure, but most of the other teams were doing 2-week sprints. They were still doing a 3-week sprint, and they were being asked, hey, why can't you do a 2-week sprint? And it's like, we could if our focus was on this, but we have these anomalies, which kind of we're going to continue to suggest this longer timeline. So the timeline, the time box of the sprint of the 5 events was an impediment. And in addition to, I said, we asked the team, so what else do you see wrong with Scrum? Again, it was time bound. They continued to carry over almost every single sprint review. And they also saw that one of the things about Scrum is that the beginning of the sprint, right? It's heavy dev work, while the QA folks they're doing, they're trying to write test cases to the extent that they can, and they're working with the dev team. But until it's put into ready for QA, or it's delivered by the dev to the QA, that's when they really start their work. And then the perception is at the end of the sprint, it's all about the QAs, rush. And the devs can step in and help where they can, because we're a single team. But really it's sort of this heavy dev and then heavy QA, and that just seems to be inherent with sprints itself. So they were like, yeah, how can we be busy all the time? And I'm being careful when I say that, but how can we level out our productivity so that we're not in these starts and sprints? And then with all of that said, we're still managing production support when those come in. So those were the cons that our team saw for Scrum. I'd like to hear if there's anyone on the phone, anyone on the meeting that had other cons, things that your team has struggled with when it comes to working in sprint, if that's actually what you do. We probably touched on all of them. Okay. So then the methodology, somebody said, hey, production support quite often is Kanban. What do you guys think of that? Because that will help solve our production support. It's in doing, and we pull it into doing, and then it's in done. It's production support. It's to do, doing, done. And so we're like, okay, so it was maybe an idea was, should we manage our production support Kanban, but still do Scrum sprints for the rest of the work? And then it was thrown out there, are we getting too complex? And so around Kanban, the plus side to that, if you notice across the top here, one of the things that the team disliked or was having struggles with, which was the time bound, that's removed from Kanban, because Kanban is continuous flow, right? You just pull a story, and then you pull the next one. And there's no, we're not committing to a certain amount of velocity or points in a period of time. We're just continuing to move from column to column. And I'm making the assumption that the audience is familiar enough with Kanban that they understand that it's usually a to-do, doing, and done column, and you just continue to pull through. Again, with Kanban, you could have the Scrum team of the 3 roles that go along with Scrum. And again, the demo, retrospective, all of those events, the team definitely saw value in and wanted to continue with. But Kanban just didn't tick enough boxes for what do we do with these feature standard where we need to do testing and we need product PO sign off. How does that happen within these 3 columns? It feels like we might not be able to manage the story if everything is in doing, just one big doing column. So I was like, okay, so there's some upsides to Scrum. You see some benefits and up to Kanban. What if we're not inventing this? There's this thing called Scrumban. Why don't we try that? And so the team said, okay, let's see what that looks like. So we didn't just jump in, we actually planned it out. But we also used the people that are a lot, I'm just going to be careful when I say this, but they're a lot smarter than us and they've done this before. So we utilized information that was available, and we essentially went from Scrum to Scrumban in 6 easy steps. And I'll show you what we did. So before we attempted anything, we set a precedence as a team to say, and this is echoed still to this day, which is, let's try something. Let's not have analysis paralysis. Let's not have commitment issues, and let's try some things and see if they stick. We could talk all day long, you know, if it's got just enough benefit that we're like, I think it could work. Otherwise, we're like, let's stop punching holes in every idea that we have, and we still do it, but essentially try. The other thing is a play on words with Scrum. If you're not familiar with rugby, but Scrum comes from rugby, but when you score points in rugby, it's called a try. So if you didn't know that before, so there's a little play on words there. So let's try something. We're going to use empiricism with the inspect and adapt. You know, and then all along, we're going to give each other grace. So in other words, if we tried something and and along the way, we were being transparent with what we tried, and we inspected and we made adaptations and it didn't work, it's okay. Now, we didn't just go into things kind of halfway. We gave it we didn't just say, let's just try everything and hope some spaghetti sticks on the wall. But the grace was that we told each other, we're not going to say, see, I told you so, especially if we had something that was a little bit diverse, where we're just on the edge, where a majority of the team was into it, but a lot of the team still was like, not so sure. But let's give each other grace so that if it doesn't work, it's okay. We didn't put the word up here, but on the flip side of that is, let's congratulate each other when we come up with continuous improvement ideas that actually do work. So those are our underlying themes. We're about to go into something uncharted waters. This hasn't been done at VSP before. We're going to try it. We're going to give each other grace so that if it doesn't work, and we're going to inspect and adapt. And Stephen, I don't know if you remember the conversation that I had with you in your office, where I was like, at first I was thinking, Stephen, we're going to try this new thing. And I first went in there. Stephen, by the way, at the time was my reporting manager. And I was like, I'm going to sort of get buy-in. I am going to get buy-in, but I'm going to tell him. And at first I was going in there saying, okay, how can I influence him into having support? And he's, of course, he's very supportive of Agile. And then I remember just saying to him, we're gonna do this, and please give us grace. So, and he said, okay, let me know how it goes. Let me know if you need me. And I said, I will. Thank you. We will. Thank you. So here we go. So through the 6 steps, we literally started. We were in a room all together, and one of the first things with Kanban, if you're familiar with it, is Kanban is about visualizing the work. So we made up, we put tape on the wall, and we came up with a mock day in the life of, and it was essentially the backlog to do, doing, and done. So we were saying, like, what would our work look like if we started to visualize it? And again, it's just those 3 columns. And then we imposed WIP limits. And this one, we had a lot of conversation about what the WIP limit would be. And we settled on one to keep from having context switching. We settled on 1 story per person, with the caveat that sometimes 2 would be okay. In other words, we would use our best judgment. There might be 2 stories. I'm thinking within the same feature. We might have gone through refinement and decided to split the stories, but once we got it in development, we found that bundling was actually better. But at the end of the day, we were talking about, and here we're running all kinds of different numbers, but this was our second adaptation. We went from just the 3 columns, and we started to put in WIP limits. And again, that's to keep from having context switching is the main thing, so that you're not working on too many things and you can't get anything done. I shouldn't say anything, but it inhibits you from being able to complete your portion of the story. And the Kanban part of this is continuous flow. You want to keep things moving. So, and it moves from left to right. And so You want the stories to continuously flow through the Kanban, and you don't have that time limit. So you're not trying to rush and meet a sprint backlog commitment within a certain amount of weeks. So this was kind of, the WIP limits are also to keep you honest so that you are concentrating, getting what you need to get done, collaborating when necessary, but then getting that so that it's moving to the right to the next column, just like in Kanban. All right, now, showed a picture of us adding more columns, but what happens is with the way we do our work is 3 columns aren't enough. So you need to add more columns. We ended up adding, I think we have a total of 7. So we have we have what we call our ready, and I'll end up showing you an example of this. It gets pulled into development. Okay, that makes sense. And then once it's done with the development, it goes into a ready column. Essentially, it's a hold column, and that one was added both for ready to test and ready for UAT. That way it sits, it's almost like a virtual, like an in tray, so to speak. And then when a resource that works within the next column is ready and has bandwidth, they go to the top of that column and they pull in the next story. And so they're continuously going from, I'm looking at the left and pulling in and pulling in. And so you can back up a minute. The first few stories, we did have that perceived, maybe that idle time waiting for the stories that are on the farthest right for that first story to get through. But once that happened and a story was pulled from every resource on the team, ever since then, we've nonstop. The factory is constantly pulling material through the production line. So we added more columns. One of the practices that from the information that was given to us on how to do this, again, relying on the experts, is that to stop early binding. Now, we didn't have, this was done as part of, it could have been done as part of sprint planning, but one of the things that they recommended is that now that you have this ready column, be very careful not to go through that column and assign the stories, because then if a developer who doesn't have a story assigned to them becomes available, theoretically you've assigned that story to someone else, and that's not how the system should work. It should work that what the next story they will pull from the ready column is a story that they have the skill sets and competencies to work on. And I say that because we had multiple applications, there was a level of expertise that isn't available across all of the applications we support. We've had, we have people who they're just different, which was part of what the complexity of us working as a single team added to it. But what gave us that's on the ready column, they might go into ready and see the first 3 stories are on an application that they're not an expert on. They're not even an expert, they're just not trained to work on. And it wouldn't make sense necessarily for them to work on those when we have other developers that are trained on that. So they'll skip those stories and go to the first one that they are qualified to work on. So pre-binding keeps us from, that way they don't go, oh, Joe has that story, therefore I'll skip it. It's like, no, you're available. You have the skills to work on that, the qualifications to work on it. You need to pull it. Let's not put somebody's name on it ahead of time. So stop early binding if that's something that you've done in the past. And then this was the big one. Stop estimating. And some of you Scrum aficionados might be like, wait, what? Wait, what? What are we going to do? How are we going to argue during planning? How are we not argue, but how are we going to have our elated conversations in refinement if we're not playing estimation poker, But so this, believe it or not, at first it was people were like, wait, how are we going to know what the size of a story is? And the idea behind this is that we're gonna be better. We're gonna be better at pulling in the S. So Stephen, back to the cross training fit into story pulling. We have cross-training to the point where we have a backup plan for resources, but they are, if we have a let me step back. It depends. If somebody knows what to do and can do it efficiently, then there could be a conversation, and product owners through their prioritization have deemed a certain story that they would rather have it get started on, even though it might not be somebody who has as much expertise on that system. That could happen. But our cross training is cross knowledge, but isn't necessarily that they are that any one person can pick up any story. We're just not tooled that way. So the answer to that would be, if you have the qualifications, if you know what you're doing enough for that particular story, you would go ahead and pull it. But you have the ability to self-assess and say, I often hear this. It's great. I don't know a lot about this story, but I'm willing to pull it and get started and see what I can do. Or it might be, I have no idea how to do that one, so I'm going to go to the next one. And both of those are very acceptable answers. So I hope I answered that. So INVEST, we use, the acronym INVEST. As you know, it's usually INVEST, and we do this as part of our refinement, as part of our criteria for definition of ready, which means it can go into our backlog. And so essentially, this is what the team needed to do. So we were like, okay, how do you estimate? Well, we emphasize the S. We really get down to, is this truly the smallest that it can be? And organically, without the team realizing it, they had already looked to achieve stories for us that were 3s and 5s maybe, but it would be 1, 2, 3, or 5. So they had already been doing that. The difference was probably the biggest discussions from my experience were the ones between the 3 and the 5. Most of the time, if the team decided that a story was an 8, it was very infrequent, and it was questions as to why. So where I'm going with this is that we became better at making sure the story was in its smallest. And if we were to go back and point our stories, I would say 90, this is a tummy rub, but 95% of our stories are definitely 5 or less. And I would say 75% of those stories are 3 or less, if you were to estimate on them. But it was uncomfortable, I think might be the right word. It was different. And there was a lot of trust. We had to kind of trust. And again, we were trying. And this was one where we actually, as we were discussing this one, we're like, okay, I don't care what the experts say on this number 5. And so we just agreed as a team, let's try it. And if we find that we are saying that stories have met the definition of ready, and we're getting them into development, and we're finding out that they're huge, then what can we do through either continuous improvement, like on a daily basis, having a mini retro in stand-up? What can we do to change that? Or we can wait till retro, however we want to manage that, but we need to inspect and adjust. And it has worked out. We don't estimate, and very infrequently, I can't even think of a couple stories or so, have we gone ahead and we've split them up during development, but that door is always open. But again, stepping back, the onus is on us just to be better at the product owners deliver a story that is in its smallest, and then we approve it. So, and that has been a huge time saving, unbeknownst to us. That was not even the intent in doing this. That's not what we expected, but we ended up, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, is reducing our planning time, and to the point where we don't even have a planning event anymore, but hold on to that. And then the 6th one is, hold on to that, because here it is. The 6th one is trigger your planning. So the idea behind this is that you have your our to do, this illustration says to do, our to do we call backlog. But when our ready column gets below a certain number, and when we first started doing this, we were really like, okay, we're below, we just came up with a number, said 10 stories, because we have, again, multiple applications. So that would be, 1 to 3 stories per application, maybe more like 2 that are sitting in the ready at any point to be pulled in. So we just came up with a trigger point. And so what we do is when the ready column gets below a certain number, we will go to our backlog, which has been prioritized by our product owners, and we will pull in the next stories. They're usually the ones on the top, but the product owners have the prerogative to change that if they want to. To be honest with you, they have the prerogative to change the ready column if they want to. And that might seem, and that could mean that the goal could change, and that's a little different than in Scrum, because it's like only the product owner can change the goal, and you need to stick with the goal for that particular increment. But this continuous flow and flexibility and the agile part of this gives us the ability to change that prioritization if it's needed. Let's see, so that's on demand. So we do that on demand planning. We tend to use our 16th minute. We have so we keep our scrums to 15 minutes. We try to. Some people might be like, what do you mean you try? Well, we have 9 people, 4 to 5 applications, maybe more, and each person is giving their plan for the day. And they're not books, they're pretty succinct, but by the time you get through 9 stories with the plan, any conversation that needs to happen, of course, if there's a lot of collaboration that needs to happen on a story, we put it on hold till 16th minute. But we use that 16th minute somebody will say, we need to do on-demand planning, and we'll do it right there and then. So we can switch from day to day what priority we'll do. Now, I'll get to, I think, Stephen's question. So I'm looking at the questions. So the first one, how do product owners sync on priorities? They have a conversation amongst themselves, and we have it clear during our refinement session on whose stories go first. But they also have come to us and said, these are the top priority applications that we have. So we have a number 1 that, unless a product owner tells us differently, or they do it as a group, will always be the stories that we're working on. And usually as much as the entire team can work on those stories, they do, but sometimes it's just a specialist skill set. So 2 to 3 people might be concentrating on those stories, which enables the other applications to also be worked on simultaneously. We have 4 main product owners within, again, I'm answering the question here. Within those product owners, they have unofficially what I would call product owner proxies. They might be some of them are BAs, but they're the ones who more actively participate and sponsor the stories, depending on the nature of it. So with those additional, we have really what we do is we turn to the 4 main product owners at the end of the day, but we have another 4. Each one of those has at least 1 person, so probably 4 to 5 other voices in their ears saying, we need to get this done. And then those 4 main product owners at the end of the day, they're the ones who decide what the order of our ready is. And listening to me say that sounds really complex. And I have said this before, if you want to blog a white paper on Andy patterns, it would be multiple product owners. But we are so fortunate that our product owners really understand the mission of the agency as a whole and what needs to be done first. And they're very accommodating, and they work really well in the sandbox. That could be a completely different picture, and it could be a nightmare for me as a Scrum Master to try and shield the team from product owners trying to get their stories in first. But they all have, whether it's because of their organization has a certain priority, so they're following the organization, but as an agency, they respect the the priority of some big projects that we have, and that those projects could shadow what they want to get done. But we're very fortunate that that is not something that we have to deal with, like the politics of the work coming through, because at the, we are working only for one agency, which is the Virginia State Police, but within that we have 2 divisions that we support. So again, everyone they get along, and I just want to say thank you for all those product owners that are on this right now. They know it. Them getting along just helps us so much. It enables us to just do our work. And Barbara, does product support automatically go? Okay, so prod support I'll get to in a moment. This is all for just stories that are part of the applications. What we're doing right now isn't production support. I'll show you what we do with that when I get to how we manage it. We use Jira as the application, but great question. Thank you, Elizabeth. So for planning, the event for planning, we do on demand, or we utilize Refine, which I know is not a Scrum event, but during refinement, if we have time, we might refine some stories, and then I'll say, do we need on-demand planning? And the answer could be yes. But most of the time, if there's a need to change our ready column, again, the product owners collaborate, and we utilize 16th minute. And for those of you, we do not change it every day. We're just saying, why not utilize the time that the team is together, rather than all of us attend a separate meeting that might be all of 5 or 10 minutes, just for the sake of saying, well, we have a planning meeting. And in fact, the team kept planning, which was a 2-hour block, hour and a half block. They kept it on the calendar and they had it every 3 weeks because they were doing sprint, right? They kept it on the calendar for almost 3 months, I think, before we finally said, you know what, we don't need this anymore. But they asked to keep it on the calendar just in case. Just in case we're not doing on-demand planning, because this is new and different. Let's make sure we have a set time to talk about planning. And we realized that we canceled that meeting time and time again. And then the team said, oh, we just don't need it as a formal meeting. So, all right. Okay. So I think this might help this will help to answer Elizabeth's questions as well. So this is Jira if you use it. So now you're saying, okay, visualize the work. We decided that sticky tape and sticky notes on the wall for us was not going to work. We were already using Jira, and so we're luckily enough, we have some people who are very keen on that tool and said, you know what, Jira has Kanban functionality. We just need to make some adaptations to that, and we can convert our wall into Jira. So essentially, like I said before, so we ended up with 7 stages. We have ready, in development, ready for QA, QA testing, ready for UAT, UAT, and then complete. These max numbers don't, please ignore these. This was an older slide here. Our max essentially is 1 per developer. And then what we do, so that's the stages. We actually have 3 swim lanes, and this answers Elizabeth's question, I hope, which is we have a swim lane for just production support, and we actually put it at the top because those stories tend to get worked on first. There are production support stories that don't have to stop our work to work on them. We have something called on hold. So it was identified not only in the information that we were given on how to convert, but sometimes you have dependencies that are out of your control. You're waiting on a resource from another team. You're just waiting for something. So if we feel that a story is going to not going to move, and this is a little bit subjective, but at least 2 days, if not more, we will put it on hold. And 2 reasons. One, this frees up my number 1 reason, it frees up that resource to pull another story, like they stick it up on hold. The other part is from a performance metric, and I'll get into this, is that we don't do velocity, we do something called life cycle. So it stops the clock, because it's a little unfair to use a metric that's showing how long a story takes to get through our process, when we are conscientiously know that it's just not being worked on. And then the third swim lane is the work that we're the current work, the stories. So we have production support, those get preference, on hold, and then current work. So the reason why we don't put the stories back into the backlog is because on hold should get attention first. And if they go back into the backlog, they don't, what's the reason? I guess they could be, we just chose to put them on hold. Looks like there's a question, how do you differentiate between the kind of stories, say production? When I get into Jira, I'll show you what we do. We actually just use labels. We'll label a story production, and then that pulls it into the production swim lane. So actually, okay. And then WIP limits, again, we had chosen 10. I apologize, some of these are, this is an older slide. So we've actually removed our WIP limits. We put those on ourselves when we first started to try and be really good about not context switching, but it's just been organically become the way of life. We know that we just don't pick up a second story. So now another thing we need to solve for, which is, hey, we don't have a sprint backlog, a committed amount of back then points. We work in just stories now. When are we going to do our reviews? So the team decided that after 12 stories, we would do our review, which is part of the Scrum events that we decided to keep. And we started that in April, and 12 stories has been our benchmark ever since. So when we complete 12 stories, we schedule on-demand review. And this is, again, this is what our Scrum board looks like on a slide. I'm going to go into Jira and show you that as well. But to give you an idea, there's the swim lane across the top for production support. The one in the middle here is on hold for various reasons. Those needed to go on hold. And then this third swim lane, which is our active stories. Any visual representation? Yeah, I think that answered it with the label. Okay. What does it look like in Jira? So if I do this, are you guys seeing Jira?
Yep, sure are.
Good. Yay. Thank you. Okay. So this is our board in Jira. Let me try this one more time. Is it going to get bigger? Okay. So this is what our board looks like in Jira. Again, production support stories. Let me open one up so you can see. We label it here with a production label, and that automatically takes it into production support. Oop. Oh, I'll use this one. Okay, and then so we have several in production support. These are on hold right now for various reasons. And then this is our current work swim lane here. Let me, is that going to help it? I'm not sure why it doesn't want to be big. Okay. And that's not going to help. See? Yes. There we go. Okay. So another thing that we have added since we started back in April is that we have in our backlog have become stories that are either owned by another team and they need our resources, or we might need resources from another team. So we've added a swim lane that's called cross-team support. And the developers have, the admins of the Jira board have actually enabled us to have one story that can show up on multiple boards. And we just do that again with a label, if you're curious as to how that happens. And then this shows, these are stories that are not coming from our product owners that are assigned to our team, but from a product owner on another team, but they need our resources to, for whatever reason. And so we just use a label here. That's the name of the team. It's cross team with Team Heimlich. We're called the Guardians. So this means that it's their story, but we're helping them out. Hope that all makes sense. Back to the board. But essentially, this enables us to visualize our work. As you can see, we at any time, right now we have 1, 2, 3 stories that are in production support. And so those will be worked on first. Sometimes it depends. It's at the discretion of the resource that gets the production support. Some of them have to be worked on immediately, and others they can, I know it's context switching, but to a certain degree, they can work on it. They might need to do certain work, and then they send it over to another team. And when they're done, while they're waiting for that, they can work on a story. So any questions on what our JIRA board looks like? There's a lot of stories going on because, again, we have 9 people plus our product owners on our team. Okay, and then you can do just if you're a big JIRA person, if you want to see at any point in time, I can run a report and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we are 9 of our 12 stories. So we're going to be completing the interval that we're working on right now. And that's what we call it, intervals, when we get to the next 3 stories. And we, the nature of our stories have enabled us to actually complete our 12 quite quickly. So one of the things that we do is we actually bundle our reviews instead of having, sometimes we'll complete an interval in 3 or 4 days because we have some stories that just go from just the nature of the story. We're doing a lot of research as part of transitioning some of our applications to a third party. So we're pulling some data for part of that project. And those could take 1 or 2 days because there really isn't any coding. We're pulling data tables and things like that. So we'll bundle, again, we'll try something. And the idea was, hey, why should we have a review every 3 days? Let's bundle it and have 2 to 3 intervals in one review. So that's just some fun stuff there, I think. All right. Any questions on what it looks like in JIRA since I just got rid of it? All right.
Hey, Barbara, you do have a question from Vipin asking about how the team deals with epics. Do you use the concept of epics with the Guardians?
Yes. We use it just like you do if you use JIRA, it's the same thing. So there's no, Kanban does not make a difference for managing epics. Let me just get into the board again here. Pull that back over.
Yeah, the specific question was, so an epic can have multiple kinds of stories in it, I assume? Do you have epics that contain stories across different product owners, or do you have different epics for each product?
Oh, no, definitely one product owner for one epic that we've had. I've not yet had a shared product owner epic. Just because we haven't had any work that I'm thinking that is 2 applications. So, well, actually, let me take that back. Yes, it can be the same one epic that is on 2 applications, but we have projects within JIRA, so we might have an epic. For instance, I think this is a good example. This is called, we have a story, the acronym is called Chris. And within it, it might need stories from a couple different applications. I can't find one right now, but essentially that's fine. If you have an epic, you can apply in JIRA multiple projects to that epic. But it doesn't, I hope I'm understanding the question. It doesn't make any difference on how the story is managed through the Scrumban board. That's more of how you manage the story from a epic perspective. All right, and let me get the Teams back up on my other screen so I can see the stories again. Thank you. I dropped that. Okay, so how do we measure performance? We got this thing called velocity before, but you told us that you don't do that anymore. So we do something called average life cycle time or life cycle time. So now we are from the moment it's in development till the moment that it meets definition of done. And again, that's where I talked about things being put on hold. And this isn't to fiddle with the life cycle. It is because if we're really not working on that story, the clock should stop. So this is just an example of what we have in our review, our interval review, and these are the major metrics that we manage. So life cycle time, number of days in the cycle, we do 12. It's been 12 since inception. It can vary, but if you're gonna do performance metrics against a variable, you just need to figure out a way to, you need to make sure you're illustrating that metric appropriately. We do have a number of stories because we keep 12 as a constant. We can do number of stories per day. Well, that's the next one down, but we do number of stories per day completed. And we are averaging just under 2 stories per day completed. And that does not include production support. Those are our epic associated stories. But we do productions. Oop, not that yet. We do production support stories, and just to give you an idea of how much that the team supports that, we average 3 per day completed in addition to our work, and our last interval we were at almost 4. And then we do measure business value. It's a little bit, not necessarily has to do with Scrumban itself, but in order to ensure that there is transparency as to that the team understands, why are we doing this? We actually talk about it in refinement to make sure there's a clarity. It hasn't been articulated by our product owner, but there's an understanding as to why this story is important and what is the value that will be driven by it. And if it's decided that, you know what, this doesn't have business value, majority of those stories tend to be, say, infrastructure related or version upgrading, things that the business gets residual benefit from, but it isn't direct to their users. And there's some subjectiveness to this. It's not black and white, but the reason why we do this is so that we don't have what some folks might have either read about or experienced, which is you have a team that is doing work, but they don't understand why. They don't see how this is benefiting the end user. They don't see where the value is driven, and it just deflates the enthusiasm of the team. We've been very lucky. We continue to monitor this, but our product owners are so good about making sure that the stories that come through are, I mean, if they had their way, they would each have their own team. So they're very conscientious of the stories that come through to make sure that they are the highest ROI for them that they can possibly get. So those are the metrics that we use, at least today. All right, looking at my time. Okay, so quiz time. Okay, so I talked about at the beginning of this, we do adhere to imperialism. We're very keen about a lot of the Scrum elements. So my question, and you can come off mute or put into chat, which of these 5 events as Scrumban do we no longer do? And the answer could be you do them all. Anybody listening know which ones we don't do anymore? Come on, Elizabeth.
I said sprint.
Oh, yeah, there you go. So someone's going to go back to, okay, I'm on, that is correct. And since I'm in presentation mode, I can't pull the X over, but you got it exactly right. Sprint is the only Scrum event that we do not do. We continue to do stand up every single day on the calendars. My watch goes off at 3 minutes till the 2 stand-ups that I have. We do planning, but it's on demand. We do review once we hit 12 stories, and we do retrospective. We actually do it every 2 weeks. So that has nothing to do with the amount of stories that we get through, but we wanted to ensure that we had that event where we could utilize the value of the retrospective at a cadence that was on the calendar. And so that's where the team is with that one. Great. Okay, the next one, Scrum roles. What of any of these roles do we still, I didn't directly talk about these, but I used all of these roles. Have we eliminated any of the Scrum roles as part of Scrumban? So the answer is no, we have not. We still have product owners. We have the Scrum Master. Sometimes on the street, you might hear it called a Flow Master because it's Kanban, and Kanban is continuous flow. And we still have developers. So we have not gotten rid of any of the Scrum roles. Okay, the next one. Scrum artifacts. Thank you, Nick, because you touched on this, and I even took the same image that you had. But based on what I talked about, did we get rid of product backlog?
No.
Nope. We might call it ready. And in JIRA, they call it backlog. So we're kind of confined to some of the terminologies that are in JIRA. But nope, we didn't get rid of that. What about burn down? Thank you, Carrie. Carrie comes to our meetings, yay. So burn down, we don't do burn down. We do life cycle is our so sprint backlog. So our product backlog is a backlog in JIRA. So our sprint backlog.
Don't call it a sprint backlog. I mean,
yeah.
yeah.
Yep. We don't call it that. We call it. You guys were like, I didn't know there would be a quiz.
To do ready. Is it?
Yeah, we call it ready. That's what we call it. Yeah, it's our to do. And then back here, sprint burn down. I think we touched on the burn downs. We don't do that. Product backlog Delta report. We don't utilize this. I don't even think any of our scrums do that, but essentially for anyone saying, what's that? It's just it's my understanding. It's the Delta, the difference between where your product backlog was and where it is today. And what about impediment list? So
you don't have that specific list, but it's certainly raised as an impediment.
Correct. You would think we got together earlier, Elizabeth, which we didn't, but yes, it is right. But we don't have a specific list, but they are talked about either directly or part of the plan in our stand-up at minimum. If not, we bring them up and we talk. We use right now Google Chats, but we'll be using Teams in the future, I think. All right. Scrum pillars. Have we gotten rid of any of these now that we're doing Scrumban? No, we don't. We still practice imperialism. So we still practice transparency. So important. And inspection. And then doing some semblance of an adaptation. Sometimes our inspection comes out and we say, you know what, this is as good as we're going to get. Although we help to, I hope to coach the team through that and say, really, let's go back to that try thing that we talk about all the time. Okay, so no changes to the pillars. What about Scrum values? Same with this one. We practice all the Scrum values as well. Openness, focus, respect, courage, and commitment. And when I got this, when I found this slide, if any of you have seen it, it's quite frequently that these 5 values are lined up. So it actually spells Scrum. But I purposely didn't pull that out because we're Scrumban. But yeah, we definitely practice the values. And so we do from Agile, we do utilize the lean principle of Kaizen, and that's also part of what you'll also often see associated with Kanban. So if you're familiar with Kaizen or not, it means good change, just as it shows here, or continuous improvement. The idea is that I want to be better today than I was yesterday. And what better is your own personal piece of string. Better is what? Just again, it's your personal piece of string. So we practice in stand-ups, which is what can we do better today than we did yesterday? Is there, if we're stuck on a story and we had a plan today and we still have that same plan again, is there an opportunity to change up that plan? And in the spirit of trusting and not is to simply say, make offers. What can I do to help you have a different plan? Because at this point, it didn't work. Does it need to be escalated? How can we remove those impediments? But part of the Kanban piece of Scrumban, and I'm not saying it's not applicable to straight Scrum, but it is every day looking for continuous improvement. So no X's on this one. Okay. So to kind of wrap it up, we took what we consider to be the best features of both. So in Scrum, stand up, we chose planning. We've gone to on-demand planning. We do review, which is for us a set of stories. We do retrospective, and we still have a Scrum team, which means it has those 3 roles, right? In Kanban, we took advantage of the flexibility, the efficiency, and it just being productive. And it's often used for production support workshops, right? So visualizing our work, continuous flow. In fact, at our stand-ups, we start on the right and work to the left. What can we do today to complete a story? So that right now that average is not 1.7, it's 2.7, it's 3.7. Like, what do we need to do as a team? What can we help each other with to get that farthest right story into that complete column? WIP limits to keep from having context switching, and the daily Kaizen, which is daily continuous improvement. So looking at this, what do we see as the pros and cons of, for us? And I wrote the Guardian Scrumban pros and cons because this is the feedback from that particular team. So they love on-demand planning. They love refinement, which is kind of morphed into our planning. They're on board now with not estimating anymore, and the time that we've gotten back. And again, that was not the intent, to say we're not going to estimate so that we can cut our planning sections in half and actually get rid of them altogether. The idea was we're going to be really good at making these the smallest that they are, so that we don't have to get into the debate. And then we found out that we don't have to get into the debate and play planning poker anymore, which lends us into less time in our events meetings. With a larger team, we have a high number of stories to provide a plan and stand up. So we were able to, kind of get through those well. And then it enables us to plan for unknowns that we never know on a single day if we'll have 0 production support that day or a lot, double digits. The downside, I might say, is sometimes we do have a possibly smaller amount of resources per application. Cross-training is a solution to that, but the specialization of knowledge of an application impedes that somewhat. And that at the time that this slide is, that we need to continue to be really good at keeping our stories small, so that we can get to that 3 to 5 day life cycle from start to end. I hope I didn't contradict my head. Okay, so at this point, Catherine, I don't know if you're still on the phone. I think you are. Catherine, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, good. So Catherine Day is one of our product owners, and I put her on the spot and I asked her, as a product owner who has come along with this journey to Scrumban, if she could talk a little bit of her experience as a product owner, and hopefully all the really good things we're doing.
And Catherine, before you get started, let me quickly point out that we are at time for this session, so please take just a couple of minutes and let's get this wrapped up.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, I can be very quick. So some of the pros, I'm the product owner for the computerized criminal history system. So one of the pros is definitely the flexibility that we have. Without the time boxes like we had in Scrum, we're able to pull stories into the ready column as needed, prioritize with much more flexibility. This is important with criminal history because a lot of times we have legislative mandates that may all of a sudden have to override other existing stories or existing priorities. But the Scrumban board allows me to kind of see the exact status of any of my stories at any point in time. So instead of just having, a sprint backlog, we're able to see, okay, these are in the ready column, these are in development, these are with QA, and see the progress of those very clearly. Really, the only con that I could come up with is because of the flexibility with planning, sometimes the epics can seem a little more disjointed or spread out, especially if we're completing other unrelated stories that might get prioritized in between completing stories in the epic.
Thank you, Catherine. All right, and thank you, Stephen. I've got 11:30 exactly. So just to let you know, at this point in time, it seemed to work well enough that there's been 2 additions to the VSP family. 2 other teams have converted from Scrum to Scrumban. And the ending, I just wanted to wrap back up from, did we solve the problem? The answer to, as far as I know, with the affirmation from Catherine, is yes. At least we are way ahead of where we were. We will continue on our continuous improvement path. But we really enjoy the benefits of Scrumban and what we can do for providing value to our customers. So I thank you all for your time today. I hope you've learned something. It's been a huge learning journey for myself and the teams since April, and I appreciate your time today.
Barbara, thanks very much for that. Very informative session. Really appreciate that, and all the questions from the audience as well. All right, we are now to the time of the morning where we bring David Crichton back onto the stage. David, I'm going to ask you to take over, and let's walk through this retrospective together.
All right, thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Barbara. Very good presentation. Sharing my screen, if somebody can confirm.
Yep, sure do.
Right. How do I get rid of your picture, Stephen?
I don't know why you'd want to.
Yeah, who knows? Well, there it's back. All right. So if you haven't yet, please go to the board. Should be in the meeting chat. Let me see if I still have it in my, nope, I don't. We'll let them find it. Copy.
David, I'll put it in the chat.
I got it, but thank you. All right, if you haven't yet, go ahead and hit the link. You'll see the login screen. You got to put in your name, check the little approval box for policy and terms of service, and then click sign in as guest. Once you do that, you should come to our CAAC 9 retrospective board. Go ahead and take a few minutes, add some comments or cards in the 3 columns. Kudos column, stop doing that column. Perhaps we should suggestions for our future events. Go ahead and take a few minutes to do that. You can also vote on cards that are already existed by hitting the plus sign on the card itself or minus sign. You have 5 votes to distribute. And we will start in 2 minutes. I will start reviewing these. You have any questions? Holler.
And all this is Elizabeth. Just a reminder, you might need to refresh your screen to see updates from others. David, I think we have a kudo in that we don't have anything in the let's not do. So that's a good sign. I hope I didn't jinx it.
Yeah, that's good. Well, this is our 9th iteration, so maybe we got it down.
Don't think I'll ever say that, at least not out loud.
All right. Any last minute comments or votes? Alrighty. Well, I'm going to start from the bottom in case somebody adds one. Under the kudos column, great to hear how DWR is using a variation of Agile to meet their needs. Thank you, Nick, for the presentation. Again, thanks, Nick. We enjoyed hearing the resource planning from DWR. It's a hard obstacle for a lot of organizations. Andre, love how DWR uses the Microsoft Stack and Agile methodology for their DevOps needs. Very impressive. Would recommend to also look into SAFe framework for lean enterprises as the agency grows and scales its Agile approach. Thank you. Thank you, Andre. Appreciate the comment. Like all visual, I like the visual for each step of moving from Scrum to Scrumban, referencing Barbara's presentation. Scrumban sounds like an interesting solution for eliminating the hardest part of planning estimation, getting folks to differentiate design from development tasks is the Scrum main pain point. And if anybody has any comments or wants to elaborate on any of these things while I'm reading through them, please speak up. Carrie said, great to hear two different examples of how competing projects support priorities are being managed. It jumped. All the visuals were very helpful. Nick said, great job to Stephen for leading another CAAC event. Carolyn, as this is my first one of these events, it was fun and helpful. Thank you all for taking the time to pull this together and share great ideas. Kim said, enjoyed hearing the different approaches from other state agencies. It's a great experience. Thank you, Kim. James said, great perspectives from Stephen and Barbara. This really helps me recognize real-world example of these concepts that I'm learning. Thank you, James. That's the whole point we're here. Sheridan, I enjoyed hearing about the blending of best of Scrum and Kanban. Excellent presentation. Yes, it was good. Thank you, Barbara. Stephen, using Teams for the first time seemed to go very well. Yeah, considering. Meredith, I love the on-demand planning. Reduces the number of events. That raises a question I saw in chat. I think Nick proposed it. He was asking if you have on-demand planning, what happens if some of the staff or team members are not there? How do you manage that, Barbara?
So for us, on-demand planning is the product owners need to decide. Well, the majority, but the team agrees. So my guess is that we would recognize that there was a key person that needs to be part of that decision and not allow the on-demand planning to happen until the right people are available.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Alka said, enjoyed hearing how different agencies are using Agile, Scrumban. Excellent presentation. Thank you, sir. Somebody anonymous said, great presentations today. You should really, sign your name to the kudos. Uh-oh, Carolyn just gave us a stop doing this. I will put one in here. Let's not stop doing these kinds of interactive conversations for the good of the Commonwealth. Hear, hear. I agree. All right, some suggestions. I'm going to start from the bottom. Incorporate questions or polls into presentations to facilitate interaction and feedback. That is always a good suggestion for presentation. Agreed.
Hey, David, I actually put a comment in there. This is from Barbara saying, I completely agree too. I'm just not good at Teams. But I absolutely would have loved to have, I would have pulled out part of my presentation to have had more interaction.
Right.
I know that's my preferred, so maybe.
And that is one of our challenges with using Teams the first time is getting used to the tools and knowing what we can and can't use. All right, Stephen said, assign someone to watch for questions from the audience during presentations. I kind of thought we were doing that, but yeah, we can certainly be more proactive and responsive. Sheridan suggested we could discuss how organizations decide on which agile framework to adopt. This might be a good topic to open up for discussion. I felt the presentations kind of provided that discussion in the presentation. What pain points they were having, and why they switched and how they switched. Maybe that
David?
didn't address it. Go ahead.
Yes, well, it might have been the timing of that.
Yeah.
I did put a comment on that one as well, which is just from where we did was the team decided. So at the end of the day, so it wasn't I'm just not to get caught up on words. It wasn't the organization itself that decided, but it was the team that decided. I think the organization chooses to do Agile, and then the teams decide to do how they want to manage their work as being self-managed as part of the Agile principles. No, self-organized as Agile principles, self-managed as Scrum.
Yeah. Sheridan, are you still on the line? Did we answer your question?
Yeah, I'm here. I think we are just exploring Agile right now, and so I think for us it's more of, I understand what you're saying, the difference between organizations and team. Um, I think for us it's like there's so many options, it's a little overwhelming, like which one is going to fit for what we're trying to achieve. And so I think maybe just getting some help or clarification on like why people chose Kanban. Why did you choose Nexus? Like, and so maybe that's just something that internally you have to do. You just have to go out and start, exploring and researching each of the different frameworks and to understand which one fits your team and the different setup that you have at your organization. But I was just trying to, if there was a discussion that could be had as to why different teams or organizations chose different frameworks, I thought that would be interesting. After I wrote it, I did see on the presentation with Barbara that she had the problem and a little bit of why. But I just thought it would be interesting to know why different organizations chose different frameworks. So,
Hey, Sheridan, this is Stephen. I've actually already made a note to reach out to you later.
Okay.
Be glad to have some of that conversation with you. I think that maybe some of what we saw today about these choices were choices that were made after teams were already sort of in mid-flight.
Okay.
And when an organization is brand new to Agile, there's some other questions to ask sort of up front. So I'll talk to you about that offline, and we may end up covering that in a future conference as well. But thanks very much for the
Awesome.
topic.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thanks, Sheridan. Thanks, Stephen. All right. I added in here, perhaps we could explore the different tools used by different agencies to manage their work with the team and globally. We use Jira. Stephen says that we can create dashboards, Stephen, to see different teams all in one dashboard and how they're working with projects or tasks, their work in progress. It might be good to hear different tools and how they're being used. Nick says maybe a dedicated timekeeper too. Yeah, somebody just stop me. Speaking of which, I got 5 minutes here.
Yeah, like it's a little self-serving, but I figured it belonged in there.
Yeah. Andre, for smaller Scrumban teams, consider using Trello, part of Atlassian tech stack, and or Miro for more creative approach to utilizing agility through unlimited Kanban and whiteboard canvas. Good suggestions, Andre. Trello is a lot like Jira. It uses the same method for Kanban. As far as Miro, I don't think it's approved by the by VITA, so we can't use that one. But good suggestions. I appreciate it.
So Miro is actually available now through Google.
Yeah.
A lightweight version, and of course we're moving away from that. As far as Trello, I would absolutely emphasize the lightweight part of that, having used some of that before. But yeah, the whole tools conversations is a big one. There's a lot out there that's possible. Everything from I use a spreadsheet to the heavy stuff that's around. So good topic.
And I know Trello has a free version. I'm not sure about Miro, but yeah, it all depends on what you're willing to invest too, right? All right, I'm going to jump back over to the Let's Not board. We've got a couple additions here. Let's not stop using the tools for these presentations. It's so efficient. Thank you, James. And Andre, whatever you do, don't use MS Planner. Don't think that anyone actually mentioned it, since it's a highly underdeveloped tool of Microsoft 365 tech stack, which most likely will become part of MS Project ultimately, based on rumors. Interesting. Good to know. All right. Anybody else? Did I miss anything or any other discussions? Thanks for all the feedback. We will certainly take all the suggestions and take them to our planning committee. Stephen, did you have any announcements about planning committee, or shall I continue on that thread?
Got it coming up.
All right. Well, then I will relinquish to you.
All right, folks. Well, we are at the end of a morning. Thanks again to all of you for spending the morning with us. And believe me, we do not underestimate the investment that you and your agency are making by your being with us for 3 hours. We really appreciate your being here. And finally, my heartfelt thanks to the members of the CAAC planning team. So without this group, these events just wouldn't happen. If you'd like to take a more active role in upcoming Agile conferences, well, we're always looking for members. So feel free to drop us a line at caac@vsp.virginia.gov. That's it. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you in June.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.